The pad on the right hand side is very slightly towed out the way, so I'm just going to adjust that. So I'm just undoing the bolt here and I'm just adjusting the angle of the pad. And I can see now that it's just towed in very slightly, which is fine. That's fine. Okay, to test the effectiveness of the brakes, pull the brake lever tight and try and move the wheel. Pull the wheel forward, and there you go, I can't move the wheel when the brakes are locked on. Same at the back, pull the brake lever and try and move the wheel, and it's fine, I can't move the wheel, so the brakes are both effective and properly set up. So that bike is pretty much good to use now. I can see that the rim's quite dirty here. It's got a bit of rubber on it, a bit of rubber residue from the brake pads, a wee bit of dirt. So I'll give it a quick clean. Just use a rag, bit of disc brake cleaner. Just spray that onto the rag, and the dirt's just coming off of that right away. Go around the rim and just clean the dirt off of it. That'll make the braking more effective. There we go. And it wasn't too bad. This bike's not seen much use. If it's really bad, just use as much spray as you need and keep going around it. Get a dry bit of the rag now, a clean bit of it, and just dry it off. That's fine. I'll just quickly do the same on the other side. One thing to bear in mind when you're using the disc brake cleaner spray is that it dries in really quickly, so you need to be quick when you're using it. A degreaser spray, which again is a solvent, it won't dry quite as quickly. Okay, there we go, that's the rim cleaned. The front rim is really clean as it is, so I'm not going to bother with that. Okay, the chain, it looks pretty clean, but anyway, I'll give it a wee clean. So I'm going to knock it onto the lowest gear at the back, sorry, the highest gear at the back, the smallest cog, and the smallest cog at the front. And I did say before that the high limit screw could be doing a wee bit of adjustment here to make sure that the chain doesn't come off down at this side. So I'm looking at the high limit screw. There's an L and a H, so that's a high limit screw. And if I tighten that in, I can actually see the derailleur moving across. And I'm just talking about a quarter turn, just to move it across fractionally. If I turn that any more, it's going to move the derailleur almost directly in line with the small cog, and quite often if you move the derailleur directly in line with it, when you take it out and cycle it, it will be very lazy when it's changing onto that cog. So it's always, in my experience, good to maybe leave it just like a millimetre beyond that cog, but not anymore. So what we'll do is just to test that again to make sure that it's not going to come off that small cog. I'm going to shift it all the way down in one go. So that's click the shifter all the way down, just there you go, and it'll just jump right down, and provided that derailleur is set up correctly, it will not be able to move in and come off any further than the smallest cog. Good way to test your derailleur limits when it comes to the high limit. it's catching on the smallest cog, so that's sorted that. Okay, I'd already put air on the tyres before I put it on the stand. Again, you'll find the recommended pressure rating on the side of your tyre. This one, it didn't have a minimum, it just had a maximum of 85 psi. So I just inflated them to 70 psi, which is very fun, that's fine. Yeah, one thing that I didn't do was just check the pinch bolts up at the brake cables to make sure that the pinch bolts are secured properly, which they are. So the only thing that I've got left to do with this now is cleaning the chain, which I was about to do there. This chain is pretty clean, so it's not going to take much cleaning. So clean a section of it, rotate it along, clean another section of it, hold it still while you're cleaning it. Just watch your fingers and the spokes if that wheel's spinning. If you want to be extra careful to make sure that you don't get your fingers caught in the spokes, then just rotate the chain backwards instead of forwards. That way the wheel won't turn. That's one full rotation of the chain. You can see that it's all nice and clean. It wasn't a very dirty chain to begin with, this one, so it's pretty easy to work with. Okay, so I'll just get a dry bit of the rag and just make sure that the degreaser's all dried off of the chain, which it is. By the way, I know I've said before, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't rotate the chain while you've got the rag on it. You better just hold it still. Okay. Stick a wee bit of lubricant on the chain. Again, just try and judge one full rotation. You don't need to put too much lubricant on your chain, you just need to do one full rotation, dripping it onto the chain, and you do not want to get any lubricant onto your cogs or your chain rings if you can help it. Some people think that you should lubricate your chain rings and your cogs. No, you shouldn't. You don't want excess lubricant on your drivetrain, because all it does is, when you're out and about, if there's any dust or dirt, it will just stick to it. So the only bits that you really need lubricated are the moving parts in the chain. When you've lubricated a chain, leave it, let the lube soak in. After about 15 or 20 minutes, take the rag and just dry any excess lubricant off your chain. If you put lots of lube on your chain, if you leave your chain wet with lubricant and you go out in the street, that's how you end up. You see these chains that are like black. It looks like they're covered in really black, dirty oil. That's because people just leave lots of excess lube in their chain, they never dry it off, and it just picks up all the dirt and dust particles off the road when you're out and about. Right, okay. The other thing that you can do is you can lubricate the pivot points in your derailleurs. That's the moving bits. You can drop a wee bit of lubricant into that as well, just to help to keep it all moving nice and smoothly. The one other thing that I said I was going to do was going to put a cable end onto this cable which was frayed, so I'm going to go and grab one. In fact, I've got one here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to use the long nose pliers here, and I'm going to use the cutting section on them. So I've tidied up those frayed bits on the cable, wrapped it around and put it back together again. and I'm just going to slide the wee cable end onto it. Make sure that there are no strands sticking out, and like I say, I'm just going to use the bit that's there on these pliers for cutting, and they're never very effective when it comes to trying to cut cables with those bits, but they're good for crimping cable ends onto the cables. I'm just going to use a flat bit now to finish it off. So that's that, got a cable end fitted. Right, so this bike's now fully serviced. Gears are working, brakes are working. Here on the tyres, all the bolts are secured. The one last thing that I've got to do is grease the seat post. So this is actually a suspension seat post, so you've got your seat post, and then within that there's a smaller bit that the saddle goes onto, and this it moves up and down, so it soaks up all the bumps. What I'll do as well is I'll just check to make sure that the saddle is tight, so it's a 6mm Allen key. There's a bolt underneath there, and I'm just going to tighten that clockwise. Make sure that the saddle's nice and tight on the seat post. And finally, it's a 4mm. That'll do it. There we go. So I'm going to clean the old grease off first. So get your rag, bit of degreaser, clean the old grease off. If there's dirt or old grease around the top of your seat post, sorry, your seat tube, you can clean that out as well. And I'm going to get a bit of grease, fresh new grease on it. So just squeeze a bit on it. You don't need to go mental. That'll be enough. The reason that you do this is you want to make sure that over time the seat post doesn't get rusty or oxidised inside the frame, because if you leave that for years without taking it out and cleaning it and re-greasing it, what can happen is it can end up rusting inside the frame, and it just gets bonded to the inside of the frame, and you can't move it after that. So it's stuck in that position, you can't raise it or lower it. Okay, so you're just wanting to spread that grease evenly around the seat post. I also put a wee bit down inside the seat tube, but you need to be really careful when you're doing this. I've cut my finger before doing this when I was careless, so just very slowly, because sometimes you can get a wee bit of sharp metal down there in the cut out section. Okay, so that's that done. Get this back in. You'll get a wee bit of excess grease coming back out when you put the seat post in, and just get it to whatever height you want it. That looks right to me for this bike. Make sure that the saddle is straight and tighten that up. There's usually a wee Newton meter rating on this. I think this one says 5. Again, it's a bit of common sense. Tighten it up till it's nice and tight, and you feel like you don't really have to force it, and you can check just by giving the saddle a wiggle left and right, it's not going to move. And if you want, what you can do is you can clean that wee bit of excess grease off there as well. I was going to get a bit of kitchen roll and do it, I'll just use this rag. I mean, you can leave that on there if you want the excess grease. It's going to help to prevent any water getting in there. Okay, so that's this bike, serviced, good to go. hopefully that was useful for you.